All right. Well, good morning and welcome to our session today. The title of this one, our session today, is Shortening the Stay on College Campuses in Iowa. I'll describe the session a little bit more, but first, I would like to thank our sponsor for this session. ITC Midwest is the presenting sponsor for all of Iowa Ideas. You may know ITC if you lived through the derecho. They work closely with Alliant and Mid-American and others to operate the power grid in this area, and they're based in Cedar Rapids. And I want to thank them especially for um, uh, the backing of this conference, this big initiative that is free to everybody because of their sponsorship and others. And their commitment to forming a better Iowa. So thank you very much. I'd also like to introduce our panelists here. My name is Craig Jamolis. I'm the enterprise editor of the Gazette newspaper here in Cedar Rapids. And with us today, we have a really good panel. Dr. Joseph Reut is the provost and vice president of academic affairs at St. Ambrose University. And I'm sure everybody here in Cedar Rapids will get to know St. Ambrose better as they merge with Mount Mercy, which we'll talk about a little bit more. Um, and also with us is Dr. Jose Herrera, who's provost and executive vice president of academic affairs at the University of Northern Iowa. And Christy Black is the executive dean of K through 12 partnerships at Kirkwood Community College here in Cedar Rapids. And she's one of the state's leading experts on dual enrollment, which we'll talk about a little bit later. So thank you very much for joining us today. I know everybody's busy, and I appreciate you carving out some time to talk to us and our audience today. About the topic, there's so many things going on in higher education. In fact, we have several sessions about higher education. Um, but the landscape in general is that there's a lot of headwinds facing higher education these days. There's a Gallup tracking poll that's been going on for years that asks people about the value of college education, and we've seen a big decline in that. Uh, you know, do you need a college education to get a job, worthwhile job? Um, we also see that uh, colleges are worried about the pending enrollment cliff, where it's predicted that fewer people will graduate high school, and so the body for student body for enrolling in college is going to drop because of that. And we see debt, college debt going way up. I think nationwide it's like $1.8 trillion. And so you have all that going on. At the same time, there's a lot of innovation going on on college campuses right now, including the ones represented by our panelists here today. And so I want to talk about that a little bit more about what colleges are doing to increase the value of a college education and what they're doing to essentially meet students where they are, and trying to shorten the stay more or less on the college campuses so people can get their education, get the proper education qualifications, join the workforce, and not run up a huge amount of debt in doing so. Um, so that's kind of the general nature of what we want to talk about here today. Um, I wonder if we can start by asking Joe and Jose a little bit more about kind of what's going on in your college campuses in terms of um, trying to stress the importance of a college degree, and then um, from that, talking to us a little bit more about some programs you have going on that meet students where they are, or try to address their concerns about getting the increase in the 4-year graduation rate. Let's start with Jose first, and I just wonder if you could talk a little bit about kind of what your uh, what the narrative on your campus is about the value of a college degree and when you go to recruit students. And then, well, let's start with that.
Yeah. Thank you, Craig, and good morning, everyone. Yeah, this has been an issue that has popped up over the last 5 or 6 years or so, but I want to make it clear that the value of a college education has never been higher than it is now. There's certainly a lot of misinformation about a value of a college education. Yes, it is getting more expensive. I think I was telling you and the other panelists that there's a recent report by the Georgetown Center for Education and the Workforce that lays out how much this a college education is actually worth. Normally a high school education, yes, you're able to get some dollars off of it, but uh, typically it's about 84 on average, 84% more over a lifetime of earnings. That's about $3.2 million of lifetime earnings for a college degree. There are lots more data in that report, but we've been struggling with it to convince families as we have conversations with families and the students as we try to give them the value proposition of a college education, not just for you and I, but any other, whether it's beauty school, any post-secondary education. We've been seeing a drop about 6% over the last few years of Iowa's college going rate or any post-secondary education rate. This has been something that we have to do better at. We have to make sure that the value proposition is there. There are jobs, and most of those jobs, if you project out, as the report has, to 2031, most of those jobs are going to require some sort of post-secondary education and, in many cases, a baccalaureate degree. The jobs that are going to be available, as we predict, are going to have some sort of training, and we have to do a better job of messaging that to the communities we serve. We're trying to adapt. As an institution, we're trying to focus in on degrees and disciplines that we know our community needs. Just as one example, I was blessed to be part of standing up a nursing program here at the University of Northern Iowa. That the first class, we had a white coat ceremony just a couple weeks back. These are the kinds of degrees that are sorely needed by our state. Nursing shortages here in the state, especially in rural Iowa, are particularly pressing, and we're trying to fill that need for our community. So, not to belabor the point, but I think most institutions like the three that you have here are really trying to innovate to meet the needs and really have the communication of that value proposition that needs to go out to our state.
Joe, I know you haven't been at St. Ambrose for all that long, but long enough. Um, talk to us a little bit about where you draw your students from and what your history has been in terms of what you're seeing in terms of people getting a college education for either St. Ambrose or now Mount Mercy. I know that um, enrollment in some of the private schools has taken a dip this year. And I don't know if that's what's driving all that. But obviously, it sounds like I think all the colleges are trying to get the word out that, hey, what they offer is valuable. So I just kind of wonder where your students are coming from and uh, what you're doing to get the word out that uh, the value of a college education at St. Ambrose or Mount Mercy.
Thanks, Craig, and thanks to everyone who's joining us. I'm for someone in higher education, for better or worse, I can be a little bit of a critic of higher education. I do think, I would agree with much of what Jose says, but I also think that sometimes higher education can find itself simply defending the value of a degree and not necessarily recognizing that it doesn't work for everyone. I think that's one of the things we have to sort of grapple with. And I'm struggling to come up with the name of this book right now. I remember the statistics, but I'm not going to remember the author right now. But example I've used with lots of different audiences is if you look at 100 high school graduates, just about anywhere in the United States, the graduation rate tends to be around 80%, right? And so that means that of those 100 students who would be a graduating class, 80% of them graduate from high school. Once you get beyond that, then you have another 20% who go right into the workforce, right, or into the military, and that leaves you with 60% who go on for some form of higher education, whether that's a certificate or an associate degree or a bachelor's degree. But only about, you lose another 20% trying to get through that post-secondary degree, right? So you've got 20%, you're losing 20% now who don't have any credential to show for the debt they've incurred, right? And then even those 40% who make it through, about half of them, right, wind up in a field employed sort of ideally in a field that aligned with their degree. So I think as much as we want to defend the value of a college degree, we have to also be sensitive to the fact that it's not working for everyone, right? At least not as we necessarily plan and hope. And that, to Jose's point, we do need to get better and more agile in terms of building pathways that are going to lead students to jobs. I mean, that's one of the big challenges in higher education right now, I think, particularly for traditional liberal arts colleges or those that identify in that way, is that, you know, given sort of the way we structure faculty, is that it can be difficult to just sort of switch out programs, right? Over time, you may have a whole academic department that may not be in demand out there in the workforce or in the professional marketplace right now, but you're sort of beholden to them because of our systems and so forth. So how does higher education grow more agile in terms of their ability to sort of tool up to meet some of these needs in society that are going to require secondary education? So I think that's the challenge that we're dealing with right now when it comes to things like nursing and education. Certainly both St. Ambrose and Mount Mercy have strong programs in those spaces. We have strong engineering programs. So we are in many ways attuned to the needs of the region, and that's where we draw most of our students from, right? Most of our students are coming from a 60 to 70 mile radius from St. Ambrose. We do draw from beyond that, but that's where the bulk of our students are coming from, and that's where they're going when they graduate, right? And we're proud of that, feeding the local professional workforce. But it is incumbent upon us in many ways to ensure that all our degrees have value, right? Or that even if you want to major in one of those traditional liberal arts, we're able to supply you with some other pieces that are going to ensure that you are attractive to employers in that professional job market when you graduate.
I do want to talk a little bit more about what some of these other pieces are, but it sounds like what you and Jose are describing is kind of an all of the above thing, where you have the 4-year degree, the 2-year degree, certificates, and continuing education, and so you have a menu of things that students can look at now. And one of those things is something that Christy is very much involved with, which is dual enrollment. Which actually happens before people go to a college campus. And Christy, I wonder if you could tell us a little bit about what dual enrollment is, how does it work, and then later on, I do want to talk about how if people are interested, families are interested, students are interested, how can they access that? So you wanted to just start by talking about kind of what it is and the growth of it. It seems like it's a really growing area of popularity among students.
Yes, absolutely. So about the last 20 years of my career at Kirkwood, I have been working very closely with our concurrent enrollment program. And not only in our region, but in the state of Iowa and across the nation, concurrent enrollment is growing by leaps and bounds. And if I was able to put up a line chart, you would see in many cases, some of the more traditional college enrollments are going down, but concurrent enrollment is going up. And so in our state, it is legislated through what's called Senior Year Plus. So there's guidelines set out in state code that covers all the rules of how you do it. And so all of our community colleges are also accredited through the National Alliance of Concurrent Enrollment Programs. Essentially, quality is very important. We want to make sure that what's being delivered through concurrent enrollment mirrors and is of the same quality of the courses and programs that are offered on the campuses of the colleges. So, but it essentially sets out and it allows high school students to begin taking college classes while they're in high school, and that's at no cost to the student or the family. The way that the funding works is that the local school districts do cover the costs associated, those that are billed by the college. And then there is supplemental weighted funding from the state that helps offset the costs that the districts are paying for the experience. And Iowa was really unique in that when this program was designed many years ago, the state legislators really saw this as a workforce development, economic development program. They saw the value of getting our secondary students connected to college learning early so that they could get into the right pipeline and find a career that's suitable for them. So other states have come along with providing some funding, but again, this is at no cost to the student or the family. And there's an array of ways students can get connected. So at Kirkwood alone, we have well over 150 through our 7-county region. We have 32 public school districts in our region, and we work with a handful of privates as well. But students, we have probably around 150, 160 high school teachers who meet the same credentials and are qualified to teach college at their high school. So we have about a third, we have over 6,300 students, high school students taking concurrent enrollment through Kirkwood. About a third of those are taking their credits within the walls of their high school, taught by their high school instructor who meets the same credentials as our faculty. We have about another third of those students who are attending one of our regional centers. Kirkwood, we have 4 regional centers throughout our 7 counties, and that allows students to come from multiple districts into a shared location to take what we call a career academy program. So the program is just that. It aligns a cluster of college classes in a specific career area. In many cases, it's about the equivalent of the first semester of a college degree. So it allows students to explore. So they're able, I remember when I went to college, my whole first year, I wasn't exactly for sure what I wanted to do. Well, students are able to do that exploration now while they're still in high school. So about a third of our students go to a regional center where they're, again, earning college credit and high school. And then the other third of our high school students taking concurrent are joining primarily an online class. And these are liberal arts classes transfer. They may also be CTE, career and technical ed classes as well. So there's an array of opportunities for them to participate. The larger majority is 11th and 12th grade, although the way the code is set up through Senior Year Plus, it does allow students as young as 9th grade to start participating, but we by far see the most participation in that 11th and 12th grade year.
So let me stay on that for just a second here. Let's say I'm a high school senior and I want to avail myself of this. How do how wide of a menu is it for me to choose from college courses? Is it only certain ones that I can take in high school, or is there, I'm just kind of, if I'm looking at this kind of a la carte of what
Right.
are my choices?
That's a great question. So again, based on Senior Year Plus, each individual high school or each individual district gets to decide what they want to contract with their community college. Most of our districts have a wide open contract, which essentially means, for the most part, they allow students to access most any class, except unless it's like a developmental ed course. Obviously, that would be similar to what a high school class would cover. So in many cases, they could potentially have access to hundreds of different classes.
That's good. Thank you very much. That kind of goes on the, I guess, the umbrella of meeting students where they're at. They're in high school, and so a third of them stay in high school and take college courses. The other ones go to regional campus. So I assume that some come to the main campus itself, but generally it's scattered, and it's not like you have to necessarily go to the college campus to get it. That reminds me a little bit about Jose. I know you and I is working on a uh, not really similar effort, but sort of similar in terms of dealing with students who are place bound, and they can't actually come to Cedar Falls for various reasons and go to the campus there. Can you tell us a little bit about that program and what you're seeing there?
Sure, Craig. The program is called UNI at Iowa Community College, so or by its acronym UNI at IACC. And this is a program that started a couple of years back. It now has close to 500 students in it, and the goal was to try to get and bring baccalaureate level education to folks that are placebound. If you have a mom that is working two jobs and has two kids, it's going to be very difficult for her to come to Cedar Falls and take courses at UNI. Even though we would love to have that, I know that family situations are very complex, and we know that there are families that would not be able to do this. And it's relatively simple, and we've gotten some dollars from the governor's office to make sure that we keep the tuition at the same rate that it would at a community college. So a student that is interested in getting a baccalaureate degree, not only do they have the challenge of trying to commute up to Cedar Falls, but they may not be able to afford it financially. So we're trying to lower the barrier of distance by having them take those courses online within their community or within the community college that they belong to. And in addition, making sure that that tuition rate is about the same as what they had been paying the previous year that they attended community college. We do have actual people, so flesh and bone folks in four of those communities right now. So the largest one is DMAC. So we have a couple of folks in DMAC that if the students run into trouble, they could always take the courses there at DMAC using their facilities, or they can go and see a flesh and bone advisor to talk through what it is that they just addressed. All in all, we've seen this program grow over the last 2 years. So, as I said earlier, we have about close to 500 students. We're asking for the legislative session to make sure that we have the funds available to keep the program going, to make sure that we meet the workforce needs of those kinds of students that are not able to leave their communities and yet want to or aspire to have a profession or a career that requires a four-year degree. This is particularly true of paraprofessionals in the educational system. So there are paraprofessional teachers that if they want to become a teacher, they will need to have a four-year degree. To get that, if they have a family, if they have children, and if they can't travel, that becomes much more difficult. We're offering those kinds of pathways for those kinds of students.
The I want to pick up a little bit about something that Joe said earlier, which is during the discussion about the value of a college degree. It's true that there is a lot of circling the horses around the value of degree and trying to defend that. But the fact that we have all these other options of what students can pursue in terms of either a higher education or some degree of higher education. I know that both you and Christy and probably Jose as well can probably talk about some of the other options that people have besides a four-year degree. Joe, do you want to just get started? Because I know you're talking about at look at merging and with Mount Mercy, is there something else the institution can provide besides just a degree, other certificates or other programs? And if somebody is pursuing a liberal arts degree, is there something else they can do as well? I just wonder if you could pick up now a little bit more to talk about kind of what your ideas there are in terms of if somebody is wanting to get something less than a 4-year degree, but some other version of it.
Right. I think there's maybe an aspirational gap here in some respects, but I think in a book, Students First, Paul LeBlanc, who was the former president of Southern New Hampshire University, talks about this sort of a vision of what he calls an educational ecosystem, right? And the idea of that educational ecosystem is that, I mean, those of us who sort of maybe had a traditional college experience think about that as something, well, you went off to college for however many years and then you finished and then you either went into the job market or you went on for more education. But it's sort of perceived as a distinct experience with a beginning and an end. When we start talking about an educational ecosystem, we're talking about the reality, really, that increasingly there are plenty of people who don't have that experience, right? If you sort of look at the demographics, probably the biggest demographic out there is adults that have some college but no degree, right? And sometimes college and universities make it tricky or difficult for those adults to come back and earn a degree. I mean, there are college and universities that say, well, if your credits are of a certain age, right, that we're not going to count those towards your new degree. And as we think about an ecosystem model, we have to begin thinking about how do we acknowledge and value the learning that students have undertaken in a variety of different forms, right? Whether that's been in the military, whether that's been in professional experience. And historically, quite honestly, for the past 50 years or so, colleges and universities haven't done a very good job of this. They've tended to value their sort of learning over and above these other sorts of learning. So I think as we become more student-centered, more learner-centered, more learner-friendly, we have to find ways to recognize that people have had profound learning experiences, and we have to be able to, if they want to earn a degree, we have to be able to allow them to count those experiences in some way, shape, or form towards the earning of that degree. I would say right now, St. Ambrose is sort of in the, we're taking baby steps in that direction. We do offer some things that are, micro credentials. We offer some badges, but our main course, if you will, is traditional courses, whether those are online or face-to-face, leading to degrees. Our aspiration is to get to a point where we're able to allow students to come in and say, okay, this is what you got. This is what what do you need next, right? Even if we don't think in terms of degrees, right? Sometimes we need to think in terms of people moving in and out of this, accessing education as they need it over the course of a lifetime, whether that's for career purposes or whether that's for their own growth, right? But I think the mindset in higher education to a considerable degree is about sort of capturing students, right? Leading them down a path till they get their credential and then cutting them loose again, right? There are some institutions right now that are moving more towards this lifetime learning model, almost rather than charging tuition, you're sort of charging a subscription, right? So you can return to us after you've got your degree for more professional growth and development at a certain rate or at a certain cost that's advantageous to you because you're an alumni, essentially. So I think moving towards that ecosystem model, it's challenging because we have this model of, when we know how many students we have, we know how much revenue we have, right? So moving towards this more amorphous model is really challenging for institutions because it's a lot fuzzier financially, right, in terms of what makes that work over the long haul.
I want to take a moment here and just let our audience know that if you have questions as we go along, please submit them, and we'll fold those into our conversation here today. So if you have a question you're dying to ask our panelists or an observation, please forward that, and we'll work that into our conversation here today. Christy, I don't want to ask you to talk about things outside your, deanship, but essentially, this whole notion of trying to offer a lifelong learning and other options besides a typical degree is something that I think people have turned to community colleges for as well. And during the Great Recession, we saw a lot of adults going back to colleges, community colleges, to try to learn new skills or make themselves available for some other job down the line. We had all kinds of layoffs, and I kind of wonder what the landscape is now in terms of we talk about dual enrollment, which is high school students. But are you seeing that a large amount of people coming to community colleges are adults now?
I would say it's still a pretty good mix. I mean, we do have a lot of, our largest population is still our direct out of high school graduates. However, we are seeing more adults returning. But it's important to note too that we have on our credit side as well as our non-credit side, we have a variety of short-term certification programs. And so to some individuals who are returning as an adult, it doesn't necessarily have to be even a college credential, but some sort of credential that's recognized by employers. So we have folks out of our continuing ed division as well as our academic deans who are working closely at aligning credit and non-credit programs. I agree with some of the things that Joe was talking about this ecosystem. And the way we kind of look at it at our college is on and off ramps. We know that in order to meet people where they're at, we need to have multiple on and off ramps. And so that's really led to a lot of sort of synergy between our credit and non-credit side of the college to make sure that as people stop in or stop out, we have a place for them. And again, really kind of focusing on, in many cases, what are those critical workforce shortage areas? For example, things in the healthcare, welding is another area where we're really trying to make sure students understand of all ages that they have multiple educational opportunities, just even through Kirkwood.
It's true that I like the subscription model because it does recognize the fact that people come and go. When I went to college, back in the horse and buggy days, it was a place you went. You physically went. You were there for 4 years, in my case, 5 years, and then you leave and start a new chapter in your life. It sounds like the biggest change, since I went to college, one of the biggest changes has been that colleges and universities they come and go from people's lives, more people's lives, and that later on, maybe I want to get another certificate, or maybe I want to go back and get my master's degree, or I'm up for promotion, but the thing keeping me from getting that is some qualification I don't have yet. Jose, I know that. I'll back up a minute. Kind of the theme of all this shortening the stay is kind of what I see college doing a lot more of is going to where students are at, and we see that through the community colleges thing at UNI, Kirkwood, etc. But how do other programs? I know that UNI has. I think they're the king in Iowa in terms of the 2+2 programs. I don't know how those fit in or they would what they would do in terms of not only adding value to your college education, but is there any kind of long-term aspect of those as well, or is it just making it easier to get your degree?
Thanks for the question, Craig. I think it's a little bit of both. You had mentioned that students come in and out of our educational ecosystem. We often refer to those kinds of students as swirlers. They swirl in and out. Sometimes those swirlers need education for a variety of reasons. Sometimes they need a credential in order to proceed and be promoted in their job. We do have quite a few 2+2 programs exactly for that reason, that we know that some students will just, in order to fulfill their aspirations for their career, they're only going to need a high school graduate degree. In some cases, they need a community college degree, but sometimes they aspire to a bit more. And we want to make that process as easy as we can. So the 2+2 allows the students to just take whatever degree they have from a community college, whether it's an AS degree, an Associates of Science degree, an Associates of Arts degree from the community college, and has that fulfill all the requirements for general education. And as you may know, a general education is a series of courses that, in theory, gives those students competencies that we all know and are appreciated by the workforce: communication, strategic thinking, ability to develop some sort of wisdom. Those we accept on a face value basis from the community college, and that allows that student to continue on, essentially going into their discipline, whatever that might be, whether it's biology, whether it's education, to get a 4-year degree. Not all institutions do that. So some institutions require you to retake some of the courses. That's causing a lot of consternation, I think, for the community members that took an English course in community college, and yet when they get to another institution, they're being asked now to retake that course because, for some arcane reason. I think we need to do a better job on the 4-year basis to make sure that we work hand in glove with our community college partners to allow those students to take the courses, take them on face value, and then allow that student to graduate in 4 years, or in this case, it would be 2 years if they have an AA or AS degree.
Can I
Yeah, go
add
ahead.
something,
Sure,
Craig
please.
and Jose? Jose, I don't think you'll mind me saying this, but how do we continue to be innovative? So we know, like the landscape, for example, with concurrent, we've got more students coming out of high school with credit. UNI was very innovative in their education program. They've developed a degree in 3 model. And Jose, you're probably, more of the details than I do, but in this degree in 3 model, that is really a direct response to the concurrent enrollment population. So essentially, by taking concurrent enrollment in high school, progressing on to the community college to get the 2-year transfer in education, if they have it all plotted out, they can get to UNI and get their education degree in 3 years.
Yeah. Yeah, thanks for that, Christy. And we can't beat up on Iowa and Iowa State on many things in the football field or in the volleyball courts, but we do beat them up here. That is that we have 9% of our population graduating in 3 years, exactly for the reasons that Christy mentioned. That Iowa and Iowa State are down in the 5% and 6% respectively. So we take pride that we're able to get that opportunity to take those students with dual degrees. These are usually, and you might correct me here, Christy, these are usually really smart students. These are students that have the maybe the gumption to start taking college level courses in high school. So the average shape GPAs are around 3.75 for these students.
Jose, do you want to talk a bit more about that program? Because it's to me, it would be a big challenge to graduate in 4 years. 3 years would be a whole other story. Do you want to talk a little bit more about that program and how do students get into it, and what is the threshold for being eligible for that in terms of how many college credits do I have to have in high school before I become a candidate for this?
Yeah, the student essentially drives the bus on this. This is not something that we essentially say you can only have this level of credit. I will tell you that on average, most of those credits are given through the community college system, and that we have, I think last year we had 111 students graduate in 3 years. But here's the baffling part that we had 5 students graduate in 2 years with a 4-year degree. I don't know how they do it. When we look into those students, it turns out that they did quite a bit of work at the community college to make sure that they're transferring in enough credits. On average, those students that graduate in 3 years have about 34 credits already under their belts when they transition into UNI. So 34 credits, just to give you a good sense that every year an undergraduate typically takes 30. So they're well on their way to being a sophomore when they come in, if on average, those 111 students. This is something that I guess we need to make sure that our communities know about, that we need to make sure that high ability students have a pathway to get out earlier into the workforce if they so desired.
Picking up on that a little bit, the flip side, or maybe the flip side of all this, we see that high school students are taking more college courses now. We see Waterloo and soon to be Cedar Rapids having career pathways in their high school. We see a lot of effort to get certificates so people can make a career decision early on and get into that right away. I can't help but think back to the days when I went to college, and in the back of my mind, I knew what I wanted to do, but I still wanted to explore a little bit, and I still had all kinds of things I was curious about. I ended up at the University of Iowa. One of the most difficult courses I ever took was a astronomy course from James Van Allen. And I took that for fun. It turned out to be the most difficult course I've ever taken. But I just took it for fun, for exploration. And I wonder now, with all these other programs going on to get people educated, get them qualified, and get them out and join the workforce and fill some of the vacancies we have out there. Is the flip side to this that students are having to grow up even faster now and decide, like, by 11th grade, what they're going to do for a living.
Yeah, I can jump into that one first here.
That's really a question for everybody. So please go ahead.
I think what we talk about is a lot of times you can find out quicker what you don't want to do. And so by providing students these exploration opportunities, we find it a win if they take, for example, if they take our Patient Care Exploration Academy, if they find out they can't deal with blood or needles, that's a win. Even though they maybe won't be progressing on into a healthcare field, they've at least ruled that out. And they've done that before they're investing in their college education. So that's one angle. The other thing that I haven't talked about, which is a part of the work we do in our program at Kirkwood, we have a department that's called the Workplace Learning Connection. They are a department that works with the schools as well as our industry partners to get students connected to things like job shadows, internships, apprenticeships, and things like that. And so those play a very vital role as well, in addition to the high school curriculum, by participating in some of those work-based learning opportunities and doing some exploration with the college coursework. Those are helping students decide what direction they do want to go, and in many cases, the direction they don't want to go.
It's funny you would bring that up because I remember when I was in high school, one of the options I was thinking was, well, maybe I want to be a veterinarian. And we went on one of those high school career days, visited places. And one of the places we went was a vet. And as he sliced into a cow to perform surgery, I thought, okay, this is it for me. No, I won't be a vet anymore. It was like that was just too much for me. Um, but in terms of, I mean, is it a good thing or a bad thing that students are having to make up their mind a bit earlier? I don't know if Joe or Jose wants to weigh in on that.
I mean, I would say, Craig, that I have a number of faculty who would sort of lament
Yeah.
the passing of the era that you are talking about. However, I'm not sure that I think we have to adapt to that reality. So I would use the example when Jose was talking about general education. I noticed that he snuck in there the phrase "in theory." These classes do these things, right? Um, so I think that's what we have to address. So St. Ambrose right now is in the process of revising its general education program, which is always a lot of fun. But this is higher education has been pretty static for about 50 years, right? And we were static because students kept coming. There were all these factors that were driving enrollment in higher education. And now that has dried up a little bit. It's dried up a lot. But because we weren't forced to adjust. We could sort of just keep doing like we did in the past, and there wasn't much worry. But now, we do have students who are coming to us with more of a return on investment mindset and a career mindset. And I think it's incumbent upon us not to just say, well, it used to be better then, but how do we adapt and evolve to this new situation so that we are trying to engage students? So in our general education reform right now, one of the things I'm telling my faculty is what we're trying to do is design courses around what we're calling contemporary and enduring questions, not necessarily around discipline. So rather than, having a student just take a survey course in history or in political science or in sociology, we're trying to engage them with a question, right? And design the course around that question. So we are actively trying to get them excited about the world that they're living in. We're trying to prepare them to address complex challenges and questions that they're going to have to address, and they're not going to arise in their discipline, right? So if we're training accountants or we're training nurses, they're still going to have to vote. They're still going to have to wrestle with questions about immigration and climate change. And so framing the courses in that way, we're trying to get them excited and engaged in the world in which they're going to live, and to give them some of the tools for that, right? How do we talk to people who have different views about a particular issue or problem than I do, right? We're trying to prepare them for thoughtful, engaged citizenship. And so I think there are opportunities for us to adjust and engage students, even if they are more career minded than they used to be in the past. I still think we can still excite them. We can still capture that imagination, and some of them will then change. I mean, that's the way I wound up in academia, right? I was an advertising major who took enough sociology courses to finally say, well, I think I'm going to try this. Right? My mother cried because she didn't know how sociologists put food on the table, but worked out all right.
Well, that's okay. But my mother cried also when I decided I wanted to be a journalist. She was a school teacher and thought I should be a school teacher as well, which I think would be a great thing. But I had my sights set on something else. I do want to talk about the culture change for universities, but first, let me talk about it from the other end. Continue this conversation about students themselves and essentially the culture change for them as well, having to make a decision earlier in their life. Jose, I don't know if you're seeing that it sounds like you're seeing that already with students coming in for the degree in 3. They already kind of have focused on where they want to go. I guess the flip side or part of that equation is the more people are focused on where they're going to go, do we see things like liberal arts being pushed further back, where it's like, well, I'm not going to pursue that history degree because I want to get my nursing degree instead in 3 years.
Yeah. Thanks, Craig. Joe mentioned that one of his faculty, or maybe a few of his faculty, would lament the fact that we don't have that many options, or students don't have as many options. I guess I would consider myself one of those that is lamenting that. And that's because it gives the freedom for those students. Back 20, maybe even 30 years ago, we had the financial freedom, because college was not that expensive, to go and explore, just like you did with, what is it, astronomy.
Yeah.
I did the same thing. I wanted to be a car mechanic, and that's where I thought I was headed. And I'm a first generation college student. I stumbled into college not knowing exactly what college was all about. And I took a variety of courses, and I stumbled into a passion, which was biology. I'm a biologist by training. I don't think our students have that option as much or at all. Now, it's just too expensive to explore courses that cost on average $3,000 or $4,000 a course. That's a price tag that puts most families, it puts that out of their price range. And as a consequence, they have to buckle down and really design the path that has very little wiggle room. Yes, true. We get those students out into the workforce, but what we miss is students that may have stumbled onto a passion that would actually be more productive in the workforce. And that's hard to swallow for someone that actually was a product of that flexibility. But I know, as Joe would say, that we have to adapt as an institution and try within our means to guide students to make sure that the dollars that they spend are going to be useful once they graduate. Yeah, that's a very different value proposition that we were offering, 20 years ago or 30 years ago for certain.
Yeah, and as you guys talk, I just can't help but think about how similar my own industry is to what higher education is happening right now, where the funding sources change entirely, and has forced us to take a more close look at what we're doing and how we're doing it. And kind of the mantra I've been talking about in newsrooms for years now has been seeing our work through the eyes of our readers. And I guess in higher education, the version of that would be seeing our work through the eyes of our students. And in my industry, we have editors and reporters who, traditionally say, "This is the beat I cover." I cover this building, City Hall. I cover this building, police. Um, and so I'm going to continue doing that the same way I've done it for decades now. And when you start to lead the culture change that says, okay, um, let's look at the work we do through the eyes of our consumers rather than our own eyes, suddenly the equation becomes a little bit different. And Joe, it's interesting that you're in the middle of this merging with Mount Mercy and having different values come together, at least somewhat different values coming together. Obviously, that must be the whole culture change of not only merging but trying to figure out what it is that students want these days, um, and maybe shaking up what it means to be a professor or administrator. Can you talk to us, share with us a little bit more about that process, a little bit about the culture change that goes along with all this?
Sure. I'd say pretty tentatively, because we're still in the early stages.
Right.
But um, I'm struck by something you said,
Yeah.
which was, and I have a faculty member here who's helping lead our general education reform, but I think this applies to the work we're doing with Mount Mercy to a considerable degree as well, which is that she says, and I think courageously so, because she said this in front of her colleagues, is that if your professional model is your dissertation advisor, you're probably going to be disappointed, right? So we're sort of at this, I think, inflection point in higher education where faculty are the work that faculty are going to have to do is changing and shifting, and they don't really have real good models for that yet, right? So as we look sort of at the future right now between Mount Mercy and St. Ambrose, I mean, we're asking hard questions about the degree to which perhaps we can sustain particular academic programs or particular majors, right? Now, does that mean those faculty go away? Not necessarily, but it may mean that they find themselves perhaps not with the luxury, if you want to call it that, of delivering an entire major or academic program to students simply because the demand for those students isn't there. So if you look at, we're Catholic universities, students have a theology and philosophy requirement that they have to fulfill. And at the same time, though, we have very few students who actually major in theology and philosophy. So wrestling with this question of how do you maintain that critical part of our history and our mission, with the recognition that we may not be able to, we're probably going to continue to have a major, but they're going to have to contribute to the student experience in other ways as well. So how does that work its way in a compelling fashion into the general education program, right? I will say that the overall, more broadly, the work with Mount Mercy is among the most challenging I've undertaken in my career in higher ed, but also among the most rewarding. Sort of, there is, because we are the larger institution, right? There's some anxiety and I think a little trepidation up there, but I've been spending at least a day on campus a week up there and meeting with faculty chairs and with program chairs. And I think there is a growing excitement about, and I think this is sort of a pivot point, right? It's sort of this, are we going to lament what we're losing, right? Which we've talked a little bit about that this morning. Or are we going to embrace the opportunity to create something new and different and hopefully more sustainable for the long term, right? And I think we're beginning to see some people embrace that opportunity and say, okay, we have a unique opportunity here. We have this sort of really truly unique situation in higher education, which is to some degree an opportunity to reboot just about everything we do, right? So we're going to have shared programs and shared gen ed, and that means we have this opportunity to build those things all up from the foundation, right? Which is frightening, but it's also very exciting because you get to build with sustainability in mind, you get to build with relevancy in mind, you get to figure out how do we do shared governance in a compelling way across two institutions. So it really is quite stimulating, and I think people are beginning to shift that mindset or that orientation to that creation space as opposed to that sort of lamentation space.
Well, thank you very much. I know we only have a few minutes left here in our session, and so I want to thank all of you for taking your time away today. I know everybody's way more than busy these days, and so I very much appreciate you taking time to share your stories with our audience. I want to also thank our sponsor, ITC Midwest, again, for making this free for everybody to participate in. And if you're staying with Iowa Ideas, this is the last day of Iowa Ideas. And so there's still plenty of sessions to choose from. If you don't have it on your calendar already, you're definitely going to want to see Jen Loeb for the closeout keynote at 1 o'clock. She's from Marengo, and she is the first Iowan to climb the highest mountain peaks of every continent, and also the first Iowa woman to scale Mount Everest. And she is from Marengo. And so you're definitely going to want to watch that. So anyway, thank you very much for joining us today. And continue on Iowa Ideas. Thank you, everybody.